Welcome back to another episode of Talk Dead to Me. I am your host, Johnny Odell, the social media manager for The Walking Dead. And this week, we have Christine Evangelista, who recently reprised her role as Sherry in Fear the Walking Dead. I keep telling you guys, Fear the Walking Dead is better than ever. This is by far its best season. I will die on that hill. And Christine has elevated it to new heights. You guys probably also know her from The Arrangement, Chicago Fire, and a dozen other projects. I am so excited to talk to her. Let's do it now. This is Christine Evangelista.
I'm from a very, very New York family. My mom's from the Bronx, my dad's from Queens, and we moved to Staten Island when I was an infant.
Wow. And how long did you live there?
My parents just moved there, moved from there, I think, this past January. So they've been there this whole time. But I moved out when I was about 18 years old, and I moved into Manhattan. I mean, it's really close. I saw them all the time.
What was your upbringing like?
It was, you come from a really very Italian-American working class family. My mom's a nurse. My dad worked for the fire department. So just like a very blue collar family that insisted on doing everything together and ourselves. So we were like a real hands-on family. My dad's also big into construction. So I was always kind of like assisting him with something, building something, whether it was my house or in somebody else's. But just a really kind of very involved, very normal, hardworking family.
Gotcha. And when did you start getting into acting?
Well, I guess I must have been really young. I was always really into dance. I was in dancing school from I was at least 2 years old on. And when I was in high school, I went to California for a while to study under Debbie Allen and train with her for a bit. But I think dancing gave me a lot of discipline and structure and just a love into the performing arts. My dad, I credit my dad a lot. My mom would work the night shift, so my dad would have us after school and he wouldn't know what to do with us. And he would take me to Blockbuster all the time. And we would just like go to McDonald's and pick up a movie and watch that before we went to sleep. But it was so exciting to pick a movie with him and watch it with him. And I think it was just a real bonding experience. And I saw how much he loved it. And I always think that had an influence on me and my love of movies. But I was really creative. I would always steal the family video camera and write little scripts and perform them with my family and my friends. And I have an array of 10-minute movies that I made all under the age of 15 years old. And it just kind of snowballed from there.
Are they any good?
I think they're fantastic.
You should submit them next time we ever have, any kind of film festival, honestly.
Yeah.
Wow. You said your dad worked in the fire department? Was he a firefighter then?
No, my dad was a mechanic with the fire department, but my grandfather was deputy chief to the FDNY. So I grew up in I grew up in a firehouse. I spent a lot of time. And my dad, I know sometimes when he would have to be picked up from school, if I wasn't feeling well or something, he would pull up in a fire truck to bring me home. And at the time, I was so mortified. But now looking back at it, that's so gangster.
That's amazing.
Cool to go home in a fire truck. But I think I was just super embarrassed at the time.
Yeah, I mean, that is pretty much look at me, as, a giant red fire truck is pulling up. But that is really, I don't know. I think that's pretty fantastic. So you said you spent a lot of time on the West Coast. When did you move out there? Did you just do work out of there?
Yeah, I started, as I mentioned, when I was in high school, I started studying dance out there for a bit. And then I think in my late teens, I was working in a playhouse and doing a lot of performances there in the West Village. And I was spotted by a manager who I still work with to this day. But she got me to go to Los Angeles and just, play the field out there and go out on auditions. So I was maybe 18 years old at the time when I was going out there and sleeping on couches and making friends with anyone and just to, build a community out there. So when I was going out there, I could feel comfortable and productive. But I started going out there that young. And it was really hard for me at first, living in Manhattan and New York for so long. Everything's so connected, and going to a place like Los Angeles where everything was so spread out, and not really knowing anyone, and certainly not knowing the business, and ultimately being on my own for most of it and navigating that all as a young woman. It was really hard. But thankfully I met some really wonderful people along the way to support me and guide me through it. And I've been able to live on both coasts pretty well.
I'm curious how, like you said, it was really hard. So were there times where you're like, maybe I chose the wrong path. Maybe this isn't working out so much. Like, what was your plan B?
I wish I had a plan B. If I had a plan B, I probably would have opted for it. It was really hard all the time. I was driving around in like a rent-a-wreck with a cracked windshield because I couldn't afford to rent like a normal car. So of course the financial element of it was really exhausting, but just the constant, as any actor could attest to, just the rejection of it all. And then finally getting something, and then for reasons beyond your control, it doesn't work out. So it's like you finally get so close to getting that pilot, or it gets picked up and then it gets canceled right away. And you feel like you're in a hamster wheel just running. And you're like, at what point can I get control over this? But I think that's all par for the course. And I just wish I could sit myself down as like a 21-year-old kid and just be like, hold on, it's okay. And there have been people that have, I've had those moments, like those moments of just like those markers where you just remember a conversation that you had with someone that really helped inspire you or just keep you going. And I remember I had a screen test for a series that it was Jon Favreau. He was directing it. And I had a really, really brutal day. My friend took the car that we were sharing and drove to Vegas. I had absolutely no money. There was no Uber at the time. I couldn't even get a car if I wanted to. And I took a bicycle to my audition. It was miles away. And I'm driving this bicycle that I couldn't even like sit on because it was so high. I couldn't fully pedal, so I had to stand on the bike as I was pedaling, which when you get to a stop sign, you realize you can't stop the bike because then you can't get back on the bike. So I had to circle the cars at like a stoplight in order to keep going. Anyway, that was a bad day, but it ended with a really wonderful meeting with Jon Favreau that really helped me out a lot in the future.
Wow. It's too bad this wasn't on Staten Island. You could have rolled up in the fire engine. I mean,
yeah, I could have, I hailed down totally a truck.
Yeah, just
before too. I had a fire truck before.
So you have a lot of credits on your IMDb. What was your first credit where you were you were talking about the Jon Favreau project, but also like, what was the one that you were like, okay, this is like really working?
Yeah, I think the first film I ever did was an indie film, low budget, and I played a stand-up comedian. I was the lead in this movie, which was a really big deal for me. And I got to throw myself into something new, like stand-up comedy. And we sat down with a bunch of writers. I think Fred Armisen was one of the people that was helping us come up with material. We came up with a bunch of really, I thought, great sets. And then I went candidly to a bunch of comedy clubs around New York City and performed them, which was, it was awesome. Like I went under an alias, perform material, and then I would just hang out in the back with the comedians, which I still do. I have a real love of comedians and comedy clubs, and like if I'm missing in New York, more often than not, I'm in a comedy club somewhere. But
okay, so the police should not look for you. They should just go to the Comedy Cellar,
which I love. But the movie itself was such an incredible experience for me, to tell a story from beginning to end like that, and fall in love with the filming process. And I think that was like a real game changer for me.
Wow. So did you kill in your sets, or were there any moments where you bombed?
People were just so, confused to see this young 19-year-old girl up on stage. And I think they were just being very nice to me. But yeah, I think the material was really good.
That's awesome. Yeah. So let's get into Walking Dead. I've seen in interviews that you've said that you didn't really know too much about Sherry when you first got the role. So what was your idea of her when you first got there?
Well, the audition, which I taped in my living room at the time, we weren't given any real character names or real plot line. And when we got to Georgia, we sat down with the showrunners and they explained to us who our characters were, which I immediately went home and looked up and read the comic books and found out more about Sherry and Dwight, and really curious as to where they were going to go, because that first episode, it picks up with these three kids in the woods covered in soot, and you don't know where they are or where they're coming from. And you find out by the end of the episode, they're chasing the men in the boots. And then you kind of get a tease, if you're familiar with the story, that they're from the sanctuary. And I was really excited. I was excited about playing a comic book character, especially someone as interesting as Sherry, and had such a real storyline, in the series.
Yeah. And did you know about the longevity of the character when you first got it, or was it just kind of open-ended?
It was open-ended. We don't really know too much ever. I think that's kind of like the way that they do this. But yeah, it was, even now, I mean, things have obviously taken a bit of a turn, and they're shifting from what the comic book series were. But I was really excited to see what that whole, and then going back with Negan, how they played that in there.
Right. Now, Negan, as you are aware, has sort of had a redemption arc in The Walking Dead, and he's still around, and now he's almost gotten to the point where he's a good guy. But there's still a lot of fans who are really conflicted on him, especially the part where, he had wives who weren't necessarily, maybe consenting to it, or maybe they were and they had no other option. So where do you land on Negan? Because especially since like 2016 with Me Too and everything, people are like, wait, does he deserve a redemption arc?
I think the series, as you come to watch Fear the Walking Dead, we really talk about that, and you'll see where she is in this episode that's coming on Sunday. Really tells.
We can talk about it, by the way. This is going to come out after episode 5, so feel free.
Yeah, I think that it's not lost on Sherry, all of the pain and the trauma that she endured when she was in Negan's grasp. And I think ultimately, like, she hasn't had any of that closure for him. And I'm all for someone finding redemption and second chances. But I think in Sherry's case, not even having the chance to have witnessed that, she's not really being given any of the closure that some of the other characters have, that Dwight's character has. So she's just carrying that pain and that anger and that hardened feeling that she has. And that's kind of led her to have all this displaced frustration and violence ultimately on Ginny's character, just because she needs to shake the feeling that she has.
Right. Before we dive into Fear, I want to know, so your character, Sherry, left us in season 7, and we had kind of, Dwight obviously left at the end of season 8 to find you. So at that point, like when you left in season 7, did you think you were going to come back?
Oh, I had no idea. I mean,
Okay.
I hope I would, because I thought there was like a really great story to tell, but I honestly had no idea.
Okay. How did you react when you found out that, oh, by the way, the end of season 8, Dwight's going to go try to and find your character? Like, was that anything that you're like, oh, should I be on the lookout for a call? Or were you just like, they're just saying that?
I don't know how I don't know. I mean, I knew that Dwight was looking out for Sherry, and I also knew that I was getting a tremendous amount of letters and interest in the fans, and I think everyone was always really interested in, are they going to unite? What's going to happen? And I thought there was a really compelling story to tell, and I think ultimately I hope that they did, because it's such an interesting love story, and it's a story that I think is relatable in a lot of ways for people. And I think that hope aspect, that people hoped these two people would reunite. I think they hoped that they would find each other. I think that's a really strong force on the show. And I think that's why the fans kind of gravitated to that so much, the idea of that hope. So yeah, I hoped too. I mean, I really do love being on the show, but I also love this arc that I get to tell of this woman since we've last saw her.
Right. And your reunion was incredible. I know you spoke with my friend Kirsten Acuna from Insider about it, and she drew some great parallels between reuniting with someone like after a pandemic or during a pandemic. And it definitely brought more emotional weight to that. You also told her that you had not really seen Austin too much right before shooting that scene. Was that on purpose?
I think there might have been some indirectly. So I guess you could say it was on purpose. I know that they were just kind of shielding me from that moment because there were a lot of people. We were on a busy street. We were in I think the city part of Austin. So there was a lot of people
Mm,
walking by. And so they really just needed to keep my character under wraps because it's a big moment to have these two characters come in together again. And so keeping me separate from Austin just indirectly happened. And then the next thing you know, we're at the end of the tunnel, just embracing after not seeing each other for so long. But it was a really sweet moment. And I think it was like really watching it back now after everything that we've experienced as a society in the past year, you could see why so many people responded to it the way that they did. The messages that I got or the photos, people were just so emotional about it all. And I think that their own experiences really played into that. It wasn't just about these two characters. It's just, it's
yeah.
very life imitating art in a sort of way.
I'm going to do a minor self plug. We do these React compilations on our Skybound channel where, fans record themselves watching the show and they upload them. And we we'll take like 20 of them and then kind of put it all together into kind of a narrative form. And so we did one, last week of you guys or 2 weeks ago, sorry, of you guys reuniting, and fans were crying. I mean, it was emotional.
I got like a lot of DMs and things, but people were crying watching it, and that hit me more than anything. But to think why, it's sweet that they're so emotionally invested in the characters, but I can't help but think that there's a deeper meaning for it, that they just wanting to be united and hug a loved one again.
Yeah,
And
it definitely elicits a strong reaction, but I think people still would have been as emotional had there not been a pandemic. I mean, people have been waiting to see your character again, so
you
that
always
must be nice.
yeah, it is. It's very flattering. But you always hope that, the work that you do as an actor and the stories that you're able to tell, like, help people tap into their own human experience. And I think, like, though listening to those memos and getting those notes, like, are all kind of play into that,
Yeah.
especially that moment of these two people.
Right. Before we get into the most recent episode that just aired tonight, quote unquote, I'm curious, in between Walking Dead and Fear the Walking Dead, you did some other projects, and I meant to get to that sooner, but I'm curious how a show like The Arrangement sort of helped develop you as an actor or a person to get you to where you are now.
The Arrangement was it was an awesome experience. It was really empowering in a lot of ways because I had a lot of creative freedom on the show too. There was a lot of collaborating with storyline and even the physicality of the character. And it was just an all around. It was a lot of fun too. It
Yeah.
was a really glamorous show that had a lot of meat and it was like it forced you to really think about what you would do in a situation like that, like being could you do you think that you really could have it all, which I think ultimately which was this girl was kind of faced with. But it was a really great show and I was really grateful for it.
Did that give you like any new skills like that you still have today, or did it develop like the way you act or give you more confidence, or is there anything, that kind of resonates from that?
I think the nature of the show, working every day the way that I did, it was 16 hours a day, every single day for 3 months. It's really intense. And I think that
Yeah.
you really get the chance to really hone your craft and your voice and understand the mechanics of everything on such a deeper level. It was, yeah, I think of course it sharpened all of my muscles and I loved it.
I'm really curious about the play that you did. I think it was last year, Mistrial, the off-Broadway play you did. How did that come to be? How involved were you in that? Was that something that was all your project?
I knew I wanted to do a play because I really wanted to fall in love with acting again and understood why I was doing it. After The Arrangement, I had done another show that didn't take off either, and I just got really depressed. I
Wow.
think was really hard to get a hold on anything. I felt like anything I was doing wasn't really lasting, and you just can't get a real grip on it. And I didn't know why I was doing this anymore. I think it's really difficult for actors, especially in television or films, when things don't work or things don't last. And it could get really, really frustrating. And I just wanted to do something that reminded me why I was doing this in the first place. So I knew I wanted to do a film, a play. And I had been trying to develop one on my own. And I thought maybe I would produce it myself. And I found this one, and it was about to go up, and I thankfully was cast in it. And it ran for a few months. And that was a really great experience for me. It was a really heavy subject matter, very related to the Me Too movement. And it was a real grind every night on stage to defend this young woman, and it doesn't really bode her way in the end. And it was really difficult. But there would always be young women waiting outside in the theater to meet with me and talk to me and like share their own personal experiences. And
wow,
and that really showed me like why we do this in the first place. It's that interaction. It's, helping somebody, it's giving a voice to something. I mean, that was the reminder that I really needed. And going back to Fear, with those people giving like these wonderful notes and having such an emotional reaction, like that's all you can really hope for. And I think that really gives me the stamina and like the will to, and the passion to like just keep going.
Wow, that's incredible. So you fell back in love with acting then?
Yeah, I did. I think it's like frustrating. The business of it is so hard. Acting itself is amazing, but sometimes the business kind of gets in the way.
I imagine. When the arrangement got canceled, is that something you took personally?
I think it was just very surprising. I don't think it was anything that we anticipated, and it wasn't anything that was kind of like, it wasn't what I was told was going to happen. So it was kind of like destabilizing, and really, there was no real answer for it.
Okay. So what does fulfillment look like as an actor? Because I feel like it is always kind of, you don't know when your next project is coming, even if you are the Brad Pitt or whatever, whoever of the world,
Yeah. I think it's really, and this goes back to what we've all experienced this past year. It's like finding that grounding for yourself and not looking for fulfillment in other things that you really don't have control over. And it's like doing things throughout your day that make you feel good, and writing and being creative and being involved in a really great creative community. And that's the things that you could do that really give you control over it, because without that, you can't really be depending on so much of the other things. But
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that in Fear the Walking Dead, we're getting to see you. I mean, it was great to see you on the arrangement because we saw so little of Sherry in The Walking Dead. And I was like, oh, I want more of that character. And Fear finally gave it to us in this episode, in episode 5. You and Austin sort of had an episode to yourself with Lenny and a few others, Maggie. But what was that like, finally having like the reins of an episode where you have like a really meaty story and an emotional, script?
I think that's the beauty of what the writers are doing this season on the show. And that's what they pitched me last December when they invited me back.
Yeah.
And they really let us know that they were doing an anthology storyline where they were diving into the characters individually and really telling like a full story. And the fans have really responded to it. I think the episodes have all been really fantastic, but because there's such a great arc in each episode. And I think that's why this worked really well with Sherry and Dwight, because there's such a strong story to tell there for both of them. And I'm so glad that we had the opportunity to do it in this way, because the writing really enabled us to. So it's kind of just like the perfect storm of the way the series was going ultimately, and all the episodes have gone, and we've been able to tell our story in that.
Did you have any hesitation in returning to the Walking Dead universe, or did you like jump at the opportunity? Because I imagine they were probably circling at you for a little bit.
Yeah, I don't think, well, I don't know about that, but I totally jumped at the opportunity to do it. I was really excited to, because I knew that there was so much to tell. I really believe this character is very different from when we last saw her on The Walking Dead.
Oh yeah.
A significant amount of time has passed, but thinking about all I could work with and play with and form to tell what happened during that time, like that is what's really exciting as an actor too. So I was really excited to jump back in, and it's an amazing group of people. There's a lot of people that I work with also on The Walking Dead that are currently on Fear. So that made it really comfortable, and it's just like just going into a super well-oiled machine and telling a story that I'm really passionate to tell.
Did you catch up on Fear the Walking Dead or watch it, like binge it at all, or did you just go in fresh?
I totally watched it. But I
Okay.
watched it too, especially with, as you know, Austin came in and there's that whole storyline with him looking for Sherry. So I was always interested in the show. I mean, I'm a fan of the whole world, but yeah, but of course I watched it.
This season feels a lot different from previous seasons. And I know a lot of the actors are saying that it's because it's an anthology. So they get time for characters to breathe a little bit more. But it still feels different, more different outside of the anthology. Do you know what's behind that? Are there some new writers that were brought in? Is there new people behind the camera? I know you weren't here in the previous seasons at all, but you still interact with the actors who were. So do you have any idea?
I don't know why it's different, but I know that they're overall on this show. I know there has been a few structural changes. I know that they've, pretty consistently, they've moved locations a lot. They've brought people in and out. And I think they've worked a lot with the show. And I know it's gone some changes over the seasons. I don't know why they decided to do the season this way. But I think that I honestly, I don't know. I'm just really lucky that they are, because I think there's been like a tremendous response to it, and people have been really invested.
Yeah, that's all I was getting at. Just because, I mean, and I've always been a fan of Fear. It's just this season has seemed so much more elevated, and all the critics and fan ratings reflect that. Everyone, like people are starting to watch a lot more again, and people are hopping on that had never seen it before. And this episode really stands out. I mean, we're 5 for 5 so far. It's fantastic.
Yeah, I think the stakes are really high this season. I think the characters are all coming in really strong, and it's really climactic. And then even bringing in Sherry and this whole environment, it just like adds like more fuel in this fire. So I just think it's like this perfect blend of the writing so spot on. The way that we're telling the stories is incredible, but you have these really, really strong characters, a lot of flawed characters that you're rooting for that aren't necessarily good. And I think that's like the beauty of the show. It's just a really, really strong season, and I'm really proud of it.
Yeah, this was a really strange episode because when Sherry returns in episode 3, we're like, oh, great. They're back. This is going to be so great. They're going to go on fun adventures together. And then it was like a bucket of cold water on your face with this episode, where Sherry turns out is involved with this group of the ex-Ginny pioneers, and they're wearing like Jabberwocky masks. Do you think Sherry's kind of in a villainous group? I guess you can't say too much.
I don't think that she's certainly not villainous, right? I think that
No, I agree.
Yeah, she's in a difficult spot. And I think they all are just really hard. They've been so burned by what they've experienced. And I think in their own way, they're just trying to seek justice and revenge. And it's all very displaced. But this renegade group that's been on this journey that she's a part of, I think that for her, it's just been this real just community that she's needed, and people that maybe could help her seek the revenge that she's looking for.
I thought the dynamic between Sherry and Dwight this episode was really interesting, because Dwight kind of fell back into his old habits, and he's really good at being the guy like torturing someone. And obviously he had to do that with Negan and everything. And I thought the most shocking moment of the episode was when, like, Dwight puts, Morgan and Al in sort of that abandoned pool. And then Sherry's like, wait, you go in there too. You're enjoying this a little bit too much. I don't want you to go back to who you used to be. Like,
and that
was interesting.
It was. And I think that's the sacrificial part of her. And I think she also knows that what she's going to do, or what she's trying to do, is ultimately, or as it's shown in the episode, going to have him revert back to the behavior that he what that he was like when he was under Negan's rule, and she doesn't want to be responsible for that. And I think that she knows that he's on this path of healing, and he knows, and she says in the episode that he reminds her of who he used to be. And I think that's the beauty of Sherry and Dwight so much, is that they existed before this whole zombie apocalypse. And I think the two of them are really just trying to get back to who they were before all of this. And constantly remind each other who they were before all of this. And she's at the point now where she's unrecognizable, and she's fighting to get back to who she was, and then hopefully she can meet him there. But the way that she is now, I think deep down, she's very scared that he won't love her like this. Right. And that will drive them even further apart. So it's like, oh no, please, I don't want you to see me like this. You can't be a part of this journey, and I'm not bringing you down to this hell that I'm living in right now. Go, if you love me, set me free, and hopefully I can come back, sort of thing. I think that's the other part. But of course, we couldn't bring Sherry and Dwight back without causing some other, they couldn't just be happy and live together again. Of course, there has to be some.
And the ending, it's so well written and so beautiful, but it drives me crazy just a little bit, because I'm like, now they're separated again, and and now Dwight's leaving clues for you, and I'm just like, oh my God, so looking forward to it. But it's not that easy.
Yeah, it's like what boy meets girl, boy loses girl, boy gets girl sort of thing. I mean, it's a pretty compelling love story.
Girl wears a scary mask and threatens to murder people. The age-old story. Yeah. It's really interesting. And Carol and Daryl are getting their own show. I'm like, that sounds nice, but I want a Dwight and Sherry show. I control the social media. Maybe I'll just try to tweet it into existence, because I hope we at least get a backstory episode or a scene or something, because we never get to see you guys pre-apocalypse. Sherry's on the run the whole time. I feel so bad for your character. She's always running from something, or she's trapped in a situation. I'm like, can this girl breathe?
Yeah, I think, and she's always trying to do the right thing. She's certainly on the run now, but who knows? She'll come back. I think she'll definitely come back.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, that gives me some hope. So you think Dwight has reason to be a little bit optimistic then, to hopefully see Sherry again?
I think they all just need some hope. I think they all just need to hold on to that. But
yeah, it always makes me want actual beer and pretzels every time he mentions that. I'm like, that didn't sound good before, but now I'm like, this sounds really good. It sounds, especially after tonight, maybe I'll get some.
Yeah, for sure. No, I am excited about the next episode. I'm excited to see what people are going to think of it too, and how they feel, if they could relate to her and what she's going through.
What's next for Christine?
Now day by day, right now I'm watching the news. We are in the middle of filming now too, so I'm excited to get back to set a bit, and working on some personal projects that I have going on also.
So Sherry makes it past this half season. That's good to know.
Oh well, I hope so.
Or maybe she doesn't. Maybe it's a flashback. Who knows, guys? I'm not breaking news here. I'm not trying to get anyone in trouble.
Yeah.
That's exciting. Great. And you have your dogs and you have your family. You have a fire engine Uber if you need it.
Anytime. I'm a lucky girl.
Seems like you have it figured out so far. So that's good. Well, Christine, that's all I have for you. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me. It was a pleasure. Enjoy quarantine. Enjoy, doom scrolling on Twitter and watching the news. We'll get through it. It'll be fine.
Here we go.
Hopefully.
God. Okay.
All right. All right. Have a good one. Thanks so much. Bye. All right, and that was my interview with Christine Evangelista. Make sure you guys follow her at C Evangelista on Twitter and Christine Evangelista on Instagram. We'll be back next week at the same time with another fantastic guest that I will announce on Twitter later this week. Until then, be safe, wear a mask, and happy birthday to Nate.